Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor, a podcast for financial planners, advisors, and RIAs looking to get the most out of yourself and your business. Join Rob Brown as he walks you through a journey that will allow you to take action in your business and your life so you can be the best that you can possibly be. Now here's your host, Rob.
Welcome, welcome. It's time once again for the Purpose Focused Advisor. This is actually the first podcast I'm recording in 2025, although it won't be the first episode in 2025. But I have to say that because the year is so new and is excited to get started. I have with me today Eric Scovill. Eric is a principal and a financial planner with Storehouse Wealth in Peoria, Illinois. And he is he runs a Christ-focused multifamily office. And he's also the partner in a suite of other direct investments. So I know this is going to be an interesting conversation because of the way that you approach your business, Eric, that is different maybe than many of the planners who will be listening to this podcast. So welcome to the show.
Sure. No, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it.
So let's dive in. Eric, how did you get into this business? Because based on our previous pre-call conversation, it wasn't a straight path.
No, it wasn't. I was in construction. Thought I'd be in construction my whole life. I loved everything about the company I was with, and when they asked me to take a big step into the executive role there, and seemingly everything that I would have ever wanted as a young man, honestly, I felt this kind of unmistakable feeling in my gut that I wasn't supposed to do it. And it led down this quest of just looking at what did I really care most about. And it wasn't the title that I held. I knew that wouldn't give me comfort on a deathbed. And so it brought into this path of identifying what is it that I'm really after. And I want to be a really great father, a really great husband, and I want to be a dedicated child of God. And all of those take time. And I love giving money away. And so I realized I needed to probably go into business for myself if I wanted to have time and a lot of money. Not necessarily, but that seemed like a more logical approach. And then it was a journey to start to discover where that was leading. And eventually my financial advisor at the time said, you need to do what I'm doing, which I laughed and said, there's no way. I don't want to do that. And for the next 3 weeks, every sign pointed me in this direction. So I decided to take a big leap of faith into a career I wanted nothing to do with. And it's been an incredible journey ever since.
Yeah, that's a great story. Because some of the way it sounds like you made decisions early in your life and career, maybe earlier than most people would. Most people might get to that first point of thinking, well, this is not what I'm supposed to do, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway because at least I know how to do it. And you seem to want to shift gears quickly, that you didn't want to let the cement dry, so to speak.
True. Well, and so in construction, I was blessed by the owner of the company, partially because of my pushing, and you earn your way into it as well. But he let me into the executive team after only about maybe 4 years into the company, 4 or 5 years into the company. I was brought into the executive team, and so I got to understand a lot more about business and business owners. I began to understand change better. And so I was okay with change, but I'm not okay knowing that there's something else you should be doing and not doing it. And so by the time I was leaving that career, I had established somewhat of a national recognition, and I had competency. And so to leave that and go into a field that has as high of a failure rate as being a financial planner does, and being relatively incompetent in it. That was a very tough
Yeah.
transition.
And so you also said that part of your decision was you liked giving money away. Talk about that. How did you figure that out? Again, seems more like excuse me for stereotyping, but an older man's type of
Sure.
decision or thought process than a younger man's.
Well, honestly, even in that company I was with, it always bothered me how little we were a very profitable company, and it bothered me how little we gave away. And I wasn't in my faith. I was definitely on the discipleship journey, but I was still pretty fresh in that. But I know that there's so many people who could really benefit from me sharing with what I've been given, and I know that I've been blessed. And so I have had that desire to give, honestly, since probably about a few years into my professional career, that really started to kick in. And when you do it a little bit and you're not doing it to get recognition, you're not doing it because you feel like you have to, a lot of people in the side of the church feel like, you're giving out of obligation. But I was kind of protected from a lot of the legalistic viewpoint. And so I was just giving because I wanted to. And when you do, you give because you want to, and you see the impact of that. The success of it blows away any, fear, and it really helps to curtail greed as well. So I fell in love with giving on accident, I would say. I think it was probably a little bit more divine than that, but it felt to me like accident. And I just knew that that's something I wanted to stay actively engaged
well,
in.
That's awesome, because I know when I talk with people about giving, and I've had the good fortune on this podcast over the last couple of months to talk to some really big givers and people who are big advisors, who are big proponents of helping their clients figure out how to give, and the joy that both the advisor and the client get from learning how to have a plan for giving is
Yes.
it just brings light to their whole life. It's not just about, I did that and I can check off the box. It's more than that.
You're absolutely right. It becomes more fulfilling. The clients, and I'm sure we'll get into this here, but it becomes a much bigger focus than what an advisor might think of what a client actually wants to talk about, where they want to drive their focus in the relationship. My clients and I spend a lot less time talking about their wealth in terms of investment performance than someone might think for the type of net worth that we're talking about. They care a lot more about the ways that they're using their money.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because you got into the business as a financial advisor, a financial planner. Sounds like you start out in a fairly traditional way. Nobody was promising you that they were going to hand you hundreds of millions of dollars of assets to oversee. But now you run a substantial firm that you term a multifamily office. So I assume from that you're working with bigger client relationships. And so it's been a pretty fast journey from getting started to this new level of working with these bigger client relationships. And I know I'm making some assumptions in there, but hopefully I'm on the right track.
No, you are. I mean, I started out. I was with an insurance company. I got 7 and 66 license right off the bat, which they don't push that. They want you to just get an insurance license and start pushing product. And I knew that I did not want to do that. I actually went to this company because I felt like I was going to be moving, and I wanted to be able to take my book of business with me. So I did not go to one of the traditional wirehouses there, while I still had much more of an investment focus. But I mean, my first big policy I sold was a Keyman life insurance, because I had been in industry in business for 7 years before I jumped into financial services. And so I knew plenty of business owners in the area already. And so I had a natural tendency to bent toward business owners. And obviously with that comes different complexities of financial plans, different types of opportunities. And so I think it was somewhat of a theme throughout the early years of my career when I was with that other firm, to have people say, and so they were, spread across the country, to say, how are you getting into deals like this? I've been in the career for 30 years and I haven't seen something like this. So I was getting a lot of looks at other things in part. And it goes to say, like, I refused to do the normal, put down, here's your 200 people that and go call them. I refused to do that because I felt like it was the Lord that led me into this. And again, I was naive enough in my faith to say, well, if the Lord's leading me into it, then I'm going to put that on him to bring it about. And so I decided to just be a good friend, a better friend to people where I had been maybe too busy, but not try to get anyone to come in for a meeting, and just let the things come to me, which was a little bit of a slower process. But it also, I think it kept relationships more genuine, and it brought about good opportunities as I kept growing. So as I grew into opportunities, they were there. And so I have never been bored or slow. Honestly, from the beginning, I just spent more time out with people, but it eventually transitioned from me spending time networking to your calendar being full of appointments coming in the door, and opportunities came. So it started out traditional. The type of clients that I was working with continued to grow, but what really changed everything is when I started our first hedge fund. So when we started a hedge fund, which no one in Peoria, Illinois, actually there's one other hedge fund in Peoria, but really no one in Peoria starts hedge funds. That's not a normal path. And when I started that, it propelled us into a whole new understanding of what ultra high net worth people are looking for, which got us into more of these alternative assets, direct placement type deals. And through all of that, that's honestly, I think, probably one of the biggest catalysts into the ultra high net worth, type of clientele that I now serve.
So why a hedge fund at the time that you did that? Again, as you said, it's not a typical thing, not just in Peoria, but in many places.
Right. And it forced me to have to leave my broker dealer, because no broker dealer is going to let you have a hedge fund. The compliance department, that's not even close to something that's possible. So to be honest with you, I was having enough success as a financial advisor to keep the lights on, but not much more than that. I was having tremendous opportunities, and I was getting, big. I had a large credit union that was going to put a policy in place that was going to pay me, well into the seven figures. That was 2 different times. Like, I had a number of these things that were coming. So I was getting good cracks at stuff that, like, the CEO and CFO were all on board, and it honestly got vetoed by an HR manager in that one. But so you're getting these opportunities there. But there was one day I prayed and I said, Lord, you've given me a steward's heart. I'm still very early in my walk, and I know that it's going to get refined more. I don't want to pretend like it's a finished product, but you've given me a heart that is like, I want to be a steward. And I think you can do a lot more through me than what you're doing, because I'm giving, but not giving very much. And I think the limiting factor is probably me, not you. So help me take the limits off of you. And so I asked God to help me take the limits off of him. And the next day, a friend of mine says, hey, you need to look at what I'm doing in this investment. And so I go and look at it, and wow, this is actually really impressive here. And so we play around with that. I invest some. I then honestly invest the very rest, all of the money I have left in reserves, trying to be faithful. And it just kept going and took off. And we were having great success with that. I then prayed again a couple months later and said, Lord, wherever you're leading this, my answer is yes. The next day, that guy says, hey, we should start a hedge fund. I said, no, definitely don't want to do that. And there's no chance. But through a couple months of seeking guidance and other stuff, I became obedient. And so we started a hedge fund against my will. But man, it's surely worked well since.
Well, that's awesome. And I don't want to diminish God's role in this, but I think it's really important for advisors who are listening to this conversation to read a really important undercurrent here. It's really easy to run a business that lacks purpose. And this is called the Purpose Focused Advisor podcast for a reason. it's okay to step out and work towards those things that you believe are really important and purposeful to you. Hopefully you've got God on your side. Well, you do have God on your side, whether you want to take him along for the ride or not, or go along for the ride with him or not. But not being afraid to step out and try new things. It's because it's so easy to say, my target audience is, retirees and pre-retirees, which is everybody in the world, because if you're not retired, you're getting ready to retire at some point or at some level, and say, I have some special and unique gifts that align with my purpose, and I'm going to use that to build my business and use those God-given talents that I have.
Yeah, well, I mean, the computer science that goes into creating an algorithmic, driven quant hedge fund was nowhere near my skill set. And so, honestly, most of this has been far above me. And so it's taken obedience and faith. And I think one of the things that I've paid a lot of attention to is in the Exodus story here, when Moses sent out, by the direction of God, the 12 leaders to go out and spy out the camp of the promised land. They're not the camp, but they go spy out the promised land, and 10 of the 12 come back and say, we can't do it. And God strikes them down with plagues. And you guys know the story. The Israelites then spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness out of judgment for that disobedience. But what it described was, they said that everyone there looks at us as if we're grasshoppers. Like, to imagine what that must have been like, that the odds, just, put yourself in some situation here that just like the odds aren't like against you. The odds are unbelievably insurmountable. And God was furious with their unbelief. He had told them about the promise, and now they had just seen everything that had happened, all the miracles he had worked to bring them out of Egypt. But their lack of faith was the big issue there. And so I have just tried to say yes and be obedient, even when I am honestly quite unsure of how it's going to go. And he's protected me in that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how what you're saying might sound to somebody who doesn't have the strength or the relationship with God to be able to
Sure.
be obedient. How do you help others understand that, who may not be at the same point in the journey that you are?
That's a great question, Rob. Yeah, because I mean, I'm coming from I was a toxic person, so I don't have this really good, pretty background of a wonderful knowledge of the Word and living a good, holy life. I was far from that, but I honestly feel like I bring a lot of practicality of what the faith is supposed to be and what the Bible says, and bring that into practical perspective here. And so if I'm looking around at the world and seeing things that, man, how does one tiny little seed turn into a big tree that then turns into, a cottonwood tree, in the way it, I can just go on and on looking at nature and realize, like, there has to be something there. And so if there is something there that's a creator, wouldn't it make sense that he's trying to talk to us and trying to show us something? And then in this, it became this point of, if there is a God and if there is a creator, and if he does want something with me, want some type of relationship with me, I should probably make that more of a priority than what I have seen. Because I grew up in a religious environment. I wouldn't say it was, we weren't religious by any means ourselves as our family, but I grew up in a religious, I went to a private school. And so I grew up with that, but I didn't see much of what real faith was being lived out by any means. And honestly, probably more hypocrites than I saw of, what the Bible would maybe call more of a real Christian. And so I just applying that, saying, man, if he's saying that he is wanting, Jesus says that, the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. I see a lot of Christians who are really good at loving your neighbor as yourself, but not too many who love God with all of their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and don't make that the priority. So I'm just looking at this saying, I don't have this all figured out. I have now read the Bible all the way through twice, and so I am far, far from being an expert. It just surely appears to me that it looks like God is asking for a whole lot more commitment than what I think is being preached across the masses on Sundays in America. And so I'm trying to bring that into every perspective of my life. I know that there are so many advisory shops out there that use Jesus as a marketing tool. And honestly, to the people then who are to some different stage in their faith, I think it can be a major turnoff, especially when you see those people use shine Jesus on the billboard, but then behind the doors they're doing crooked stuff or pushing terrible annuities that are just lining their pockets or whatever that might be. Where you see that, I think it honestly is a detractor for a lot of people. But I'm just looking at it saying I can't let people represent God to me, because they're going to fall short. I know how bad I have good intentions, but I know that I fall. I screw up. And so I need to understand that other people are in the same boat. But I do think that if God is real, that I think he probably wants more of me than just Sunday, from 9 to 10 kind of thing. And so that's where this honestly started applying into business. And I was willing to put a stake in the ground saying, I'm going to lean into this and give this everything I've got. And that's where he's continued to confirm and show me more and honestly drive this into higher and higher levels of business and influence.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that depth of faith and belief and obedience is the example that needs to be out there, because other people, other advisors need to see people who are actually practicing that faith and obedience, because you're more likely to follow what somebody does and not what somebody says, And this might sound trite, but the fish on the website is just a fish on the website if that doesn't represent how that person actually goes out and does life. And I think that's really important. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because I want folks, advisors who listen to this podcast, to understand your business. You talked about the hedge fund. You talked about the direct investments that you do. But as I understand it, you serve a very ultra high net worth clientele, and I want to talk about how that how you, as a principal of Storehouse Wealth, kind of wants to position yourself as a financial planner, knowing that you're, and you said it in a note that you sent to me, that behind that is you want to bring the whole truth of the Bible into your role as financial planning. So we've kind of seen you talk about that, but let's talk about a little bit more about the mechanics of the business side of things.
Yeah. So we are a fee-based firm. We do we do take commissions too if that happens, but our work is all fee-based or mostly all fee-based. So I have some legacy clients from the very beginning in here, but any new client now, our kind of minimum threshold that we're looking for from a net worth is pretty substantial. And I'll just say it on here that we're really not trying to take on clients that are less than 100 million in net worth at this point here. The type of work that we're doing, some of it is similar because everyone, puts their pants on one leg at a time. A lot of the work is similar to what anyone else does. You certainly have the management of a portfolio of public equities, and you have that side of it. You have engagement with their tax team, engagement with their legal team, and working on the insurance side of this to make sure that they have the right coverage. those things are all, and I'm not just talking about life insurance, I'm talking about engaging in, all the P&C and some other coverages as well. But so that's where a lot of the holistic financial planners live. And so we're doing that. We take a much stronger emphasis on taxes than most, going deeper into the code to try to find other applicable opportunities for our clients to try to capitalize on not capitalize, but really honestly partner, like it's talked about, where the tax code is meant to be a way to partner with the U.S. government. And so we're looking for opportunities to partner with the U.S. government there and get tax incentives to do so. So we take a strong stance there. Inside estate planning, we, instead of just handing them off to the lawyer, we want to also, because we don't have any of that none of that is in-house. So as a multifamily office here, we will work with the client's team if they have them, if they're satisfied with their lawyer, CPA, or even investment advisor. We'll have clients in here who we are kind of put into the head coaching role, and they have their own investment advisor. So that certainly works for us too. The work that we're trying to do then is be much more intentional with it. So, someone's got a $30 million, estate that they're handing down and 3 kids. The general consensus is, well, do, A and B here to try to mitigate estate tax. And then after that, we're going to give, a third to each child, a third. And that's how it goes. But we want to go deeper than that. Like, how much really is enough for you to live off of? How much what's the right amount for you to give your children? What are you trying to actually accomplish for them? Do you just want to give them the assets? You don't want to have a fight at the end, or do you want to be more intentional with that? Obviously are you giving with warm hands versus cold hands? With the giving, when's it going to be more effective for them? And so we want to go deeper into it than just splitting up the estate, and then really check in with them about what would the Lord have you do with the money, especially with what's left over after you define how much is enough for you and how much is really enough for your accomplishing what you want to for your children. One of the big things that we do is we engage Christian counselors to work with our families, because, and this is everywhere, every family has wounds and hurts and issues and misunderstandings along the way, and marriages need help, and parent-child and relationships need help, and children, and grandchildren need development. But because our families have the resources to do it, we want to make that a priority. And whereas other people, it's easy to just navigate or, kind of navigate around that, we want to address those issues head on. Let's go after, the misunderstandings from 20 years ago. Let's try to fix those. Let's work on communication inside our relationships here. And so we bring in Christian counselors as a big part of the work that we're doing. We include that in our fees to the clients, that they're going to have that. And we take that away as a barrier. So the Christian counselors bill us directly because we want them to do the work. We hold family summits where we bring in as many of the generations as are applicable to come in and have all of those conversations about money that are much easier to steer clear of, and so because you're going to have someone wants to have a conversation about something financially, but it's tough to bring that up at the Thanksgiving table. And so we want to give good open forums to have all of the financial discussions, make sure everyone's communicating the plans from a state perspective and get those corrected and up to date. And really check in on how everyone's doing financially. And so we do a lot of education in those. And then also we normally, again, a lot on the relationship side of this, of really strengthening the family and finding the weak spots to go after them. So our view of financial planning goes far beyond the balance sheet.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really glad you took the time to walk through that and share some examples, because some might say, hey, that's crazy. Why would you put yourself in the middle of conflict? Right. But
yeah, absolutely. And they're correct. They are correct.
But to do the work the best way possible with authenticity and intentionality, you have to be willing to weather some rough seas with your clients if that's what is necessary. And in fact, maybe even stir the water up a little bit, because they may be
If,
pretending that it's all shallow, calm water.
yes. If any of my clients were listening to this right now, then they would hear you when they heard you say stir up the water, they would be laughing and saying, yes, absolutely. So, but where the reality is that's probably one of the biggest spots to bring value is to do these things that no one else is doing. So they have the means to do this, but rather than just, doing, so some family offices focus on concierge services and we'll help you, find your next Maserati. We will help you book your travel and that type of stuff. And that's helpful. It is, but no one has permission to touch the issues inside some of these families as we do. And because when someone trusts you with their wallet, they tend to trust you with their heart. And every advisor listening to this knows that they have people who, if they've built some relationship with them, especially if they've talked about more than just the annual review, and if they've built more of a relationship, then people trust them. They confide in them in a different way than they do, whether it their priest or their pastor or other closer friends. And so we have this interesting permission to go deeper with some of these clients than most advisors think they do and choose to. So I charge higher fees, which therefore allows me to not need to push them out the door to get to the next one. So I charge higher fees working with higher net worth people, and it gives me the time to actually go deeper into those questions. But we've had some of these discussions here where there is not another person on earth who has the right to go there with them or say the things or stir the pot like I have, because of the position that they have put me in inside their family. And from an authority level is kind of probably a misuse of that word, but there's some level of authority inside the family that then they give me, and it allows me to go there. And so, yeah, I think it's a different level of value that you can bring than, to think that some other advisor is going to step in to one of those families and try to take that client away. Like they just have no clue what we've actually gone
The
through.
lease on a Maserati gets only so good. Yeah. So
exactly.
no, that's fascinating. And I just think, because, I'm a big cheerleader for financial advisors. I think there is a real opportunity that financial advisors and planners have to make genuine differences in the lives of their clients. And, some of that is getting them across some goal lines, like the retirement goal line, but there's the ability to go further. And when you think about, a lot of things, maybe one of the big, things in the industry today is, when is fee cannibalization going to come into play, and everybody's going to be forced to lower their fees because everybody's doing the same thing. That's not going to happen to you, because if anything, you have earned the right to increase your fee because of the value that you're adding and really helping that family do financial planning at the deepest level possible. And at the same time, in doing that, turning them into, you talk about creating more true stewards, because you're helping them not just do, I'll call them earthly things with their money. They're also doing godly things with their money through their stewardship and their giving.
You're absolutely correct, which is then freeing them from the normal, the normal cycle of people as they get higher in their wealth. They tend to need to keep more cash on hand. They have more fear. They've got more concern. And the advisors who are dealing with, clients that are in that, especially when you get into that, high 7 and 8 figure range, and you go from there, like, you realize that their concern about money increases dramatically. Maybe not both spouses often, but typically at least one of them, the concern over money has greatly increases. And when you turn someone into a steward, and I don't take credit for that, it's the Holy Spirit's work, but when someone turns into a steward, they are free. And so part of what we've done is we're helping people's increase their net worth. And we are still laser focused on doing all of the right things with their portfolio management and all of that. But it's this other side of it that gets a lot more attention than what you would normally expect. And so when someone turns into a steward, then they find freedom, they find peace, they find joy in giving. They find that they can increase their giving unit size. So when they used to give in $10,000 increments, well, now we're able to give in $100,000 increments or $1 million increments because we've changed our giving unit in there when they realize what they really have available to give. And so I think that becomes this big transformational piece. And you're absolutely right about fees. My fees keep going up, and they go up considerably. And anyone I've talked to that's in the advisory world, their jaw drops when they hear it. But it's true because the value that you bring is tremendous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about time to land the plane here, Eric. But one thing that you mentioned when we spoke last time is that you see as a challenge in your business right now is finding ways to align Christian capital with worthy projects. Talk about that. Why is that a challenge to you, or something that you're really thinking about and focusing on? I think we can probably make some attachments based on what we've talked about already, but you kind of called that out very specifically.
Yeah. So when you obviously getting exposed then into this world of alternative investments or direct investments, there are some incredible projects happening. There are things, whether this is someone using Bible translation or someone fighting the opioid epidemic or someone doing incredible evangelical work, like whatever it is, you think of some worthy cause, and there are phenomenal people doing that work. And a lot of times there are phenomenal Christians doing that work, but we have there's so much wealth inside the Christian world here in America, but the majority of that wealth is going where everyone else's is. It's whether it's let's just use it's in a custodian that is not honoring the Lord at all with their investment choices, or it's in broad index or anything else that's not being targeted. And I do think that somewhere in there of that accountability that we have, that we will be given account for, I think there's something in there for the investments too, of the way that what accountability we have to the investments. So as a Christian, I'm not saying that everyone should go put all their investments into these high risk, private equity projects. I'm not saying that at all, but I do think it pays it is wise for people to start to take a better look at how their investments are. So, good biblically responsible investments out there. There are ETFs and other people who are doing that work in the actually, singular equity space as well. But then definitely into some of these private projects, when you get to accredited and qualified investors, there are some really great projects out there that need good funding. And I don't think that most Christians have any clue that they could be basically getting what you call kind of a double or triple bottom line. So you have the return, these are some very valid investments that have that type of bottom line, but they also have a bottom line of doing good for the world as well.
And it takes time, and it takes somebody to guide that person to them who has that that knowledge, because it's a very specialized level of knowledge. And it's very easy, I think, as a financial planner, when you're helping somebody be more philanthropically focused, to go towards the easy than the hard, to go to the donor advised fund versus looking for something that really helps the client see a real need that maybe needs more attention than can be given by siphoning off annual distributions from that donor fund.
Correct, absolutely. And it's just it requires such, honestly, it requires a strong level of humility from the advisor to be able to say, I don't know, because anything you get into with this, there's going to be stuff that we run into that is above our understanding. So we have to be willing to say, I don't know, let me do more research. You got to set up a foundation. Well, turns out there's 7 different types of foundations, and a private foundation, which is the normal one that people set up, isn't the best one most often, but it's the one that is the simple go-to. And so doing some more research into this is important. making sure that you don't manipulate people, because when you bring faith into this, you can manipulate someone real easily. And I think that's such a high calling on us. And I think that as financial advisors, again, it doesn't say this in the Bible, but I'm just looking at this and saying, am I going to be accountable to, not responsible for everything that my clients do, but am I going to have some accountability to the way that they manage their funds and the way that I guided them into that, and that whether that's actually the investments they're in or the giving that they did or anything else. Again, I'm not trying to create doctrine here. I'm just trying to ask questions and honestly let the Holy Spirit guide me into that. Is my role bigger than making sure that I stay compliant with, FINRA and the SEC?
Yeah. I could go in 100 different directions with that, but we're running towards the end of our time, and I'm just, thinking about the fact that for a lot of advisors and for a lot of clients of advisors of these higher net worth people in particular, but not necessarily just higher net worth people, they have a heart for something. You ask them, is there something that you would like to support because you see this problem in the world? And I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but they might say, well, more water wells in Africa. Absolutely. And there are great ways to support that and make that really easy. But there are other ways to do that where there can be even more significant impact if it's done the right way and packaged and you think more deeply into the problem, because that thing that's in their heart might be that one simple thing they're trying to solve for, but the simplest way to solve for it isn't necessarily the thing that is going to move the needle for whatever that cause is that they want to bring out, because they want to be obedient to a sense of stewardship and giving that it goes beyond. So, and that advisor and that client have to work on that together. So I feel like I stumbled over that a little bit, but I just think it's taking that extra step. Most of the really top level advisors that I know and that I work with aren't just trying to settle. They're trying to say, how can I do more? And I think some of the things we've talked about today represent those more.
You'd be really surprised that if you don't have to push someone into this, because we shouldn't be giving out of guilt or obligation. But if you have a conversation, just like what you suggested, Rob, of asking them about that, find out what is it they really want. And then as an advisor, drop whatever selfishness you have, thinking that the fiduciary means, you need to think about what fiduciary really means with this. But if you were to encourage them to take $20,000 off of the, of their RMDs and put toward, all right, you want to do this? Well, let's go. What if we put 2 wells up in Africa here? And obviously some wells you can do for a few $100, in some places it takes 20 grand a well in Africa. But so let's go do this. You said you want to do that. Well, let's do it. And how about this? Let's put a plan in place that over the next 5 years, you're going to do blank number of wells, and I'm going to help you get there. What does that do now for that person? How do they look at their money differently? How does that change their faith? How does that change their view toward the world? How does that change their relationship with you as an advisor? Now, if you're doing that, guess what? When they come in for the reviews, okay, great. We're up this percentage this here, and that one's down, and here's what I said. Okay, but let's talk about the wells.
Another one. Can we increase our plan? So no, I think that's
So we still have to do our investment work, but I just think that the client's mind goes to something that's more important than how great our return was for the last year.
Well, that's awesome, Eric. I really appreciate your time today. Actually, your extra time today. But this is, I think, this is a very important conversation, and I'm very excited about the work that you are doing with your clients in advancing God's call in your life. It's a pretty amazing thing when you see God at work in somebody, and I definitely can see that and feel blessed by having the time to talk with you.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Rob.
And Eric, last question. If somebody wants to learn more about you and what you're doing, what's the best way to connect with you?
It's real easy to check out the podcast where I'm putting all the stuff that we're doing on there. So that's a good spot to grab some topics that are of interest to you and listen to those first. The podcast is Wealth Well Done, in short for well done, good and faithful servant. So Wealth Well Done is that's a good place to go. But if you've got an advisor out there who wants to ask more questions about this, I'm an open book. Nothing that I have is proprietary. It all belongs to the Lord. And I'm just happy to share wherever.
So we'll put a link to Wealth Well Done, to your website and to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So perfect. Anybody who wants to contact you can certainly figure it out from there. Again, thanks for your time. And to our listeners, thanks for giving us a little bit of extra time today on the podcast. And remember, we're always rooting for your success. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Purpose-Focused Advisor. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, truestfancoaching.com. There you'll learn all about becoming a purpose-focused advisor. You'll also find today's show notes and links to the other gifts and resources we talked about during the episode. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, we're rooting for your success.